The room went silent the second the bullet hit the concrete wall 3 inches from Ambassador Chen's head. Dust and stone fragments exploded outward in a gray cloud that hung in the air like smoke. The translator, small, forgettable, the woman everyone ignored, dropped her folder and shoved the ambassador to the floor so hard his shoulder cracked against the tile. No hesitation, no scream, just movement, clean and brutal, while everyone else stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. "Stay down," she whispered. The security detail finally moved, hands reaching for weapons that wouldn't help against a sniper they couldn't see. The second shot came through the window, closer this time, shattering the glass conference table into 1,000 glittering pieces. Someone screamed. The ambassador's chief of staff scrambled backward on his hands and knees, breathing in short, panicked gasps. The translator was already at the window, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the compound walls, calculating angles and distances while the room descended into chaos behind her. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now. Stay with me until the very last word. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Her name was Maya Santos, 5'3", 110 pounds in heels she never wore. She'd been the embassy translator for 8 months. The quiet woman who sat in the corner of every meeting with a notepad and a patient expression, translating Mandarin to English and back again while diplomats argued over trade agreements and territorial waters. Nobody looked at her twice. Nobody asked where she'd been before this posting. Nobody noticed the calluses on her trigger finger or the way she always positioned herself with a clear line of sight to every exit. She wore glasses she didn't need and kept her hair in a simple bun that made her look older, more forgettable. She drank water instead of wine at embassy functions and always left early, citing early morning briefings that didn't exist. When she spoke, her voice was soft, deferential, the kind of voice that disappeared into background noise. But right now, in this room with gunfire echoing off marble floors and grown men cowering behind overturned furniture, her eyes had gone cold and sharp, scanning the roofline across the street with the focused intensity of someone who'd done this before. Many times before. The head of security, a former Marine named Collins, who'd spent 6 months underestimating her at every diplomatic function, finally made it to the window. "We need to evacuate, now. Get the ambassador to the safe room." Maya didn't move. The safe room has windows facing east. The shooter has elevation and thermal optics. We move the ambassador through that hallway, and he's dead before we reach the door. Collins stared at her. "How do you..." "Because that's where I'd position myself if I wanted a clean shot on a high-value target during evacuation." She pointed to the building across the compound. 4th floor northwest corner, the only angle that covers both the conference room and the safe room approach. He's been there since before the meeting started, waiting for darkness. You can't possibly know. 900 meters. Light crosswind from the south. He's using a suppressed rifle, subsonic ammunition to avoid sonic crack detection. Probably .338 Lapua. He's missed twice because your ambassador moves like a drunk elephant. But he won't miss a third time if we give him a clear shot during evacuation. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was staring at her now. Not the translator. Something else. Someone else. Collins's hand moved toward his sidearm, confusion giving way to suspicion. "Who the hell are you?" Maya ignored him. She was counting, calculating. The shooter would be adjusting for the missed shots, compensating for the ambassador's erratic movement pattern. He had maybe 30 seconds before the compound's counter-sniper teams locked down the perimeter and cut off his exfiltration route, which meant he'd take a desperation shot, probably through the wall, using the heat signatures from the bodies clustered near the window. Everyone move to the interior wall, now. Nobody moved. They were diplomats, not soldiers. They didn't take orders from translators. The third shot came through the exterior wall, exactly where Collins had been standing 2 seconds earlier. It would have gone through his chest and into the person behind him if Maya hadn't grabbed his tactical vest and yanked him sideways with enough force to spin him completely around. The bullet buried itself in the mahogany paneling behind them, still hot enough to smoke. This time, everyone moved. Maya was already at the ambassador's side, checking him for injuries with practiced efficiency. "Are you hit?" "No, I don't." "What's happening? And you're the target. Someone wants you dead before tomorrow's summit. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen." She looked up at Collins, who was staring at her with an expression somewhere between shock and dawning recognition. "Kill the lights, all of them. Then get on the radio and tell your counter-sniper teams to sweep the 4th floor of the Cultural Center, northwest corner. Tell them the shooter is using thermal optics, so they need to approach from below and use the building's heat signature as concealment. I don't take orders from, you do now, because in about 90 seconds, he's going to realize he's lost thermal visibility and switch to a spotter-assisted shot using laser designation. If your people aren't in position by then, the ambassador dies, and you explain to Washington why you ignored tactical intelligence from..." She stopped, almost said it, caught herself. Collins's eyes narrowed. "From who?" The lights went out. Emergency protocols kicked in, and the compound's backup generators hummed to life, bathing everything in dim red emergency lighting that turned the conference room into something from a nightmare. Maya used the darkness to move, slipping past Collins toward the shattered window with the fluid economy of someone who'd spent years moving through hostile territory. She could hear the security team coordinating over their radios, voices tight with controlled panic. The counter-sniper teams were mobilizing, but they were moving too slow, too cautious, trained for protection details and VIP escorts, not direct action against a skilled operator who'd already demonstrated patience and precision. The shooter would be gone before they reached him, unless someone with the right training went after him first. Maya reached the window and dropped into a crouch, using the wall for cover, while her eyes adjusted to the darkness beyond the compound. The Cultural Center was 400 meters away, a Soviet-era concrete block that had been converted into a museum nobody visited. 4 floors, minimal lighting, dozens of hiding positions, and at least 3 viable exfiltration routes. If the shooter was smart, and he was, or he wouldn't have gotten this close, he'd already be moving toward the east stairwell, ready to abandon the position and fade into the city before anyone could lock down the perimeter. She closed her eyes, not to hide from what was happening, but to remember. To access the part of herself she'd buried 8 months ago when she'd hung up her rifle and accepted a posting that was supposed to be quiet, safe. The kind of assignment you took when you wanted to forget what you'd done in all those places that didn't officially exist. But some training never goes away. Some skills are burned too deep to forget. She opened her eyes, and the translator was gone. What remained was something older, colder, something forged in mountains and deserts, where the only difference between living and dying was the ability to outthink the person trying to kill you. Collins appeared beside her, moving more carefully now, seeing her differently. The teams are in position. They're sweeping the 4th floor. They won't find him. He's already moving. Then we've lost him. No. Maya stood, her voice quiet but absolutely certain. We haven't. She moved toward the door. Collins blocked her path, hand on his weapon, still not sure what he was dealing with. You're not going anywhere until you tell me who you are and how you know this much about counter-sniper operations. Move. That's not... She looked up at him, and whatever he saw in her eyes made him step aside without another word. Some authority doesn't come from rank or position. It comes from the absolute certainty that the person in front of you has done terrible things in terrible places and walked away when others didn't. The hallway was clear. Emergency lighting painted everything in shades of red and black, turning familiar embassy corridor into something alien and threatening. Maya moved fast, no longer bothering to hide what she was. Her posture had changed, her movement pattern, everything about her shifting from harmless civilian to something predatory and efficient. She hit the stairwell at a run, taking the steps 3 at a time, heading up instead of down. Behind her, she could hear Collins shouting into his radio, trying to coordinate a response to something he didn't fully understand, trying to contain a situation that was already spiraling beyond his training and experience. The roof access door was locked. She kicked it open with a force that sent the door crashing back against the exterior wall. Cold night air hit her face, carrying the scent of diesel exhaust and cooking fires from the city beyond the compound walls. Beijing at night, sprawling and endless, 900 million people, and she was hunting one. She ran to the southern edge of the roof, eyes scanning the cultural center across the compound. 4 floors, flat roof. The perfect position for a long-range shot and a quick escape. But the shooter had stayed too long, taken too many shots, gotten greedy or desperate or maybe just unlucky. Now he was trapped between the counter-sniper teams moving up through the building and the response forces locking down the perimeter. Unless he'd planned for that too. Maya dropped to one knee at the roof's edge, using the low concrete barrier for cover while she studied the cultural center's roofline. There. Movement. A shadow separating from other shadows, moving with purpose toward the building's eastern edge. The shooter, abandoning his position, heading for an exfiltration route that would take him over the roof and down the fire escape on the far side, away from the responding security teams. She didn't have a weapon, didn't have a radio, didn't have anything except 8 months of rust and the muscle memory of 200 missions that had taught her how to read human behavior in the dark. The shooter reached the roof's edge and stopped, checking his route, making sure the fire escape was clear. In that moment of hesitation, Maya saw everything she needed to see, the way he moved, the way he scanned. The casual confidence of someone who'd done this before and expected to do it again. Not tonight. She stood and sprinted across the embassy roof toward the compound's western wall. 50 meters. The wall was 3 meters high, topped with decorative iron spikes that were meant to look elegant rather than defensive. She hit it at full speed and jumped, catching the top of the wall with both hands, ignoring the spikes biting into her palms as she pulled herself up and over in one fluid movement. She dropped into the narrow alley between the embassy and the neighboring building, rolled to absorb the impact, came up running. The cultural center was 2 blocks away. The shooter would be on the fire escape by now, descending towards street level, confident in his escape because nobody could have predicted his route or moved fast enough to intercept. Nobody except someone who'd spent years thinking like him, hunting people who thought they were invisible. She reached the cultural center and circled toward the eastern side. The fire escape was there, exactly where she'd known it would be. And halfway down, moving with practiced silence, was a figure in dark clothing, carrying a rifle case. Maya picked up a piece of broken concrete from the alley and waited. The shooter reached the bottom of the fire escape and paused, listening. Good tradecraft. Careful. Professional. He scanned the alley, saw nothing that concerned him, started to move toward the street where a motorcycle would be waiting, engine warm, ready for a quick fade into Beijing's endless traffic. Maya stepped out of the shadows and through the concrete. Not at him, at the motorcycle. The chunk of debris hit the bike's fuel tank with a hollow metallic clang that echoed off the alley walls. The shooter spun, rifle case coming up defensively, his other hand reaching for a sidearm. "Don't!" Maya's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You won't make it. Drop the case. Hands where I can see them." The shooter was good. He didn't panic, didn't make any sudden movements. Just stood there, calculating odds, assessing the woman in front of him. Small, unarmed, alone. His hand started to move toward the weapon. "I know what you're thinking," Maya said. "You're thinking I'm nobody. Just some embassy staffer who got lucky. You're thinking you can draw that Glock 19 on your right hip and put 2 rounds center mass before I can close the distance." The hand stopped moving. "You're thinking I don't look like a threat. That's what everyone thinks. That's why I'm still alive, and 147 people who underestimated me aren't." She took one step forward. Just one. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop the rifle case. You're going to put your hands on top of your head. And you're going to kneel down, cross your ankles, and wait for the security team that's about to flood this alley." "Who are you?" "The translator." "No." The shooter's voice was professional, clinical, curious. "You're not?" "No," Maya agreed. "I'm not." For 3 seconds, nothing moved. The alley was silent, except for the distant sound of sirens and the shooter's controlled breathing. He was making the calculation, weighing his training against hers, his experience against whatever he saw in her eyes. He dropped the rifle case. Hands went to his head. He knelt, ankles crossed. "Smart," Maya said. The security team found them 2 minutes later, Collins in the lead with his weapon drawn and 6 tactical operators behind him. They secured the shooter with practiced efficiency, processing him like a package, while Collins stood there staring at Maya, trying to reconcile the quiet translator who'd sat through 8 months of boring diplomatic meetings with the woman who'd just run down a professional assassin in a foreign city. "How did you?" "I knew where he'd go, because it's where I would have gone." "That doesn't..." Collins stopped, started again. "Who are you? Really?" Maya looked at him for a long moment. Behind her glasses, behind the forgettable face and the patient expression, behind everything she'd built to hide what she'd been. "Maya Santos, embassy translator, that's who I am now." "And before?" She didn't answer, just turned and started walking back toward the embassy, leaving Collins and his team to process the shooter and secure the scene. Her hands hurt where the wall spikes had cut into her palms. Her shoulder ached from the impact of hitting the alley floor. Small pains, familiar pains. The kind of pain that reminded you that you were alive because you'd moved faster, thought clearer, and been willing to do what others wouldn't. The ambassador was waiting in the secure conference room when she returned, surrounded by his remaining staff and a perimeter of nervous security personnel. He stood when she entered, his face pale but composed. "They told me what you did. I did my job. Your job is translating trade negotiations." "My job," Maya said quietly, "is making sure you're alive to negotiate them." "Collins says you tracked the shooter, apprehended him alone, unarmed." "Collins talks too much." The ambassador studied her face, seeing her clearly for the first time. The State Department doesn't hire translators with counter-sniper training. "No, they don't." "So what are you? CIA? Military intelligence? Some kind of, I'm the person who kept you alive tonight. That's all you need to know." She turned to leave. The ambassador's voice stopped her at the door. "Thank you." Maya looked back at him. "Don't thank me. Thank whoever made the call to put me here instead of someone who was actually just a translator." 2 weeks later, After the shooting had been investigated and classified and buried under layers of diplomatic language that made it sound like a random criminal incident instead of a targeted assassination attempt, Maya sat in a secure briefing room in the embassy's basement, across from a man who'd flown in from Langley specifically for this conversation. "Your cover's compromised," he said. "Everyone knows you're not just a translator now. I know. We're pulling you out. New posting, new identity. Same mission, different theater. Where? Does it matter?" Maya thought about that. About 8 months of pretending to be someone harmless. 8 months of diplomatic functions and boring meetings and the slow, suffocating weight of trying to forget what she'd been. What she still was underneath all the careful camouflage. "No," she said. "It doesn't matter." "Good." The man from Langley slid a folder across the table. "Moscow, cultural attaché this time. The ambassador there has been receiving credible threats. Needs someone who can translate Russian and also keep him breathing." Maya opened the folder, read the first page, looked up. Same job, different city. "That's right." She closed the folder and stood. "When do I leave?" 72 hours. Enough time to brief your replacement and pack your things." Maya nodded and walked toward the door. Behind her, the man from Langley spoke again. "The shooter, by the way. The one you caught. He gave up his employer during interrogation. Foreign Intelligence Service. They'd been tracking you for months, trying to figure out why an embassy translator moved like a Tier 1 operator and had calluses from a rifle she supposedly never carried. You blew your cover the second you saved the ambassador." "I know." "Was it worth it?" Maya paused at the door, thought about Ambassador Chen, alive because she'd moved when others froze. Thought about the shooter, now sitting in a CIA black site somewhere, his operation dismantled, his network compromised. Thought about all the people who were still breathing because someone who looked harmless had decided that looking dangerous mattered less than doing the right thing. "Yes," she said. "It was worth it." She left the briefing room and walked back up into the embassy proper, past colleagues who now looked at her differently, past security teams who nodded with new respect, past all the careful normalcy she'd built and destroyed in the span of one midnight shot that had missed by 3 inches. In 72 hours, she'd be someone else. Somewhere else. Playing the same game with different pieces on a different board. That's what people like her did. They moved through the world wearing faces that didn't match their skills, doing jobs that weren't in their official descriptions, keeping people alive who never knew how close they'd come to dying. Some people called it espionage. Some called it intelligence work. Maya called it translation. Taking the language of violence and threat and converting it into the language of safety and survival. Making sure the people who needed protection got it, even when they didn't know they needed it. Even when they didn't know she was the one providing it. The translator. That's what she was. Just not the kind that worked with words. She collected her things from her desk, a few books, a coffee mug, the reading glasses she didn't need. Someone had left a note, probably Collins. Just 2 words in careful handwriting, "Thank you." Maya folded the note and put it in her pocket, picked up her bag, walked out of the embassy into the Beijing night, already thinking about Moscow, already planning how to be invisible again, how to be underestimated, how to be the person nobody noticed until the moment they needed her most. Because that's who she was, underneath everything. Not a translator, not a spy. Something simpler and older than either of those titles. A protector. Someone who stood between the people worth saving and the people trying to kill them. Someone who moved in the dark so others could live in the light. They'd never know her real name, never know her real face, never know the count of lives she'd saved or enemies she'd stopped. But somewhere, right now, someone was breathing because she'd been there. Someone was alive because a small woman who looked harmless had proven to be something far more deadly when it mattered most. That was enough. It had to be enough. Because in 72 hours, she'd be doing it all over again in a new city with a new name. And the only thing that would stay the same was the mission. The mission never changed. Only the faces, only the languages, only the distance of the shot that started everything. One shot at midnight, 3 inches from death, and the translator who wasn't.